Good evening and welcome to Inside Government, a public affairs show brought to you by Cayuga Community College for the spring 2021 semester here at the college. This is a show that's shown on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, as well as ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, as well as Win 89.1, which is the college's radio station. I'm Guy Cosentino, your host. We are delighted to have in our studio today someone who's appeared on and off over the last 5 years since he's held the job as chief, but Auburn Police Chief Shawn Butler, who will be concluding his 25th year with the department and 5th year as chief in July. And so we've asked him to come in to talk about some things that he is working on. He is not gliding or loping into retirement. He is going full gallop with a number of initiatives that we wanted to talk to. Obviously, he's been deep in the issue of the Black Lives Matter movement and, in fact, received some national recognition for that early on. He's been aggressive in his department to try to attract minorities and women to the department, as well as implementing a plan that was required by the governor last summer by executive order for police reform. And we'll also talk to him about one of the things that he's proudest of, I think, we'll confirm that, and that is moving the department towards state accreditation. Chief, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So before we get to your retirement, which is the original reason we had you, but there's a lot of other stuff going on, how are you and your family doing during COVID?
We are surviving. We miss travel. My wife and I really like to travel, but no, we're doing well. Hopefully we're on the other end of the pandemic, but things are going as best as can be.
And I know frontline employees in your department can't get more frontline than that.
No.
So have most of your officers been vaccinated?
So since we don't mandate it, I don't know a hard number. I did do an internal poll, and about 50% in the beginning wanted the vaccine. So we're constantly letting them know it's available if they still want it. Those that didn't.
And you got yours?
I did get mine. Yep. And. I think it was a little less than what the normal response is, but I had a reaction more to the first shot than the second.
Oh, that's interesting.
To the point where I actually went and got tested because I thought after the first shot I might have had COVID, so that's how bad I felt. But no, I got through it.
Well, it says that Kathleen Cuddy was here last week or the week before, and she said the healthier you are and the better your immune system, the more it will knock you out. So you're apparently in good
I hope
stead.
So.
We hope.
I hope so.
So I know you don't require it, and we had the mayor on the other night. We talked about that. But for APD, at one point, your day shift kind of got wiped out.
Yep, not totally by the virus itself, but by having exposure to each other.
Right, quarantine.
So, quarantine, absolutely.
So have you had a lot of cases?
No, knock on wood, we have been great. I got to give credit to the city manager. Back in March last year, we met very early and implemented some city policies, and I think that's really what kept us healthy and operating, for the most part, up to standards.
So other than a week to 10 days where you had a whole group of men and women quarantined, what's been the biggest challenge during COVID for your line officers?
Really contact with the public. And at one point we had a phased approach to how much contact we were having. And at one point we were up to a phase 4 where, unless it was an absolute necessity to be face-to-face, we were taking a lot of calls.
So necessarily serving warrants, things.
Or domestic incidents where we had to be on scene. If we could handle it by phone for a short period of time, we were doing a lot of calls for service by phone. And it really took away from what we were trying to do in regards to community relations. So it was a tough transition, but I got to tell you, our staff really rose to the occasion. And every implementation or every change, because it goes back and forth, they really took with stride. So they did a great job.
You talk about community interaction. So one of the items that has been on the agenda for the last 9 months has been this executive order from the governor. Sans what the governor's going through right this week and this month, what was he requiring of all law enforcement?
Really things that we've been doing for quite some time. So I challenge the name reform in his title. It's more of a collaboration, a continuation of the things we've been doing, but it's really getting the public's input, sentiment, their opinions on policing locally. So we really tried to focus it on policing here because we often see things that happen on a national stage. It'll affect us, but it has nothing to do with us and how we police here. But really, again, a continuation of the great things that we have been doing with our partners in the community. Legitimacy, building the trust, the transparency, all those hot button key.
But you and Sheriff Skank were doing this beforehand. Sure. Well, that was in July. I think you had several public meetings beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
He had scheduled one long before this came out. And then this last, what I would say, 5 months, there really has been a collaboration between you, Sheriff Skank, the city, and the county to come up with plans, but they're separate plans.
They are separate plans, but because the sheriff and I, in the county and city as a whole, we really share the same mindset on what our community needs in regards to policing. It really made sense to collaborate together. Why wouldn't we? Because we do a lot of the things we share. We sit on the same committees. We deal with the same groups. We work with the same groups. So it just made sense. Instead of duplicating efforts, let's do it together.
So when the governor came out with this process, I don't think we would all have thought that in November, December, and January, when you really had to hit your stride on some public meetings and some meetings, that we're all going to do it by Zoom.
No, definitely not.
So how did that impact the process?
It takes away from the personal touch of being in a room face to face with people. Unfortunately, I like that part of it. I like doing this face to face. It makes it more intimate. But we made it work. It wasn't the best, no, but it also, you could look at it on another hand, it gave more people the opportunity to take part. I wasn't overly happy with the amount of input we got, but when we do these types of initiatives, we don't always get a large crowd, I would say. And good or bad, people.
Well, if you don't get sometimes when you don't get the large crowds, because there's nothing they're not complaining compared
that
to
could be
a different flip
sure.
side. But one of the things that you did at the last public session, you had a lot of young people, and I think you noted it.
Absolutely.
Or the sheriff did. Where were they coming from? Was this? They also had some good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Or they asked some questions. Where were they in the mix?
I believe that was part of a class. A teacher had asked them to participate, which is great. They have an opinion or a stance on life in what we're going through in regards to social justice, much different than you or I or other people. I think this, with my own kids as well, and I think it's such a great advantage for our youth. This generation is so much more accepting. They don't really, differences to them, it doesn't matter.
So not the normal stereotypes.
Absolutely. That's my opinion. I don't think that they share the normal, and maybe we'll even call it the implicit biases that we might have been raised with. Kids now are just so forgiving and open to differences, which is great.
So where are you in the process?
So
you released a plan last week.
We did to City Council. The plan was released to them, and now it goes into a public comment period for 2 weeks. So tonight we'll be starting the second week of public comment.
And does this have to be approved by City Council and then sent off to Albany?
So the way we've chosen, City Council has chosen to do it is they're going to pass this plan by resolution. The other option was to make it a local law. So they've chosen to do it by resolution, and once that is done, the approved resolution will go to the State Department of Budget.
But you will be, in essence, they're not going to be passing specific rules, regulations, and proclamating those. That will be done through your department.
Right, as policy, procedure. I guess in some jurisdictions, it may look different. There's 500 plus police agencies in New York, and I don't think one of them looks the same or how they got to this point. But correct, ours is more through community input and collaboration that would then, through their participation and input to us, could mold policy. A lot of our policies, and I know we're going to get to it, are through the accreditation, and they're state recognized as best practices.
So before we get into, I also want to talk about the Black Lives Matter and your department's role in this. Are body cameras part of this policy, and where does Auburn stand?
Yep.
Because obviously in the last year, from George Floyd was not body cameras, I don't believe, for the most part. But for a number of cases, body cameras have been an issue, whether they have them, whether they're on. Yep. Where is Auburn in that mix? And I know the county's looking at this as well.
Yeah. So it's not written in there as a strict that we will have them by this date. We want them.
So you think they're important?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not only for the officers, but the public at large. It builds that trust and legitimacy with our agency.
So from your perspective, you'll stay through a budget presentation.
Yep.
I'm assuming Jeff Dygert got you submitting numbers if you haven't already.
Yeah.
So our body cameras, well, first of all, how expensive would it be for, they are inexpensive.
They are. You know where the real cost is, though? So I believe we could probably afford the outfitting, the actual equipment purchase. The real cost and a long-term cost comes with the data storage and with the new laws in regards to data and releasing that to the DA's office and defense attorneys, discovery laws. We would really probably have to have somebody just in charge of redacting and submitting all that recording.
You're talking about a full-time position just maybe for that.
And that's going to be a really
So you're talking
cost.
about tens of thousands of dollars,
easy.
if not hundreds of thousands
Easy.
of dollars. So is there any, have you set aside or made a recommendation about body cams in this year's budget?
No, I am going to leave that to my successors. Really, it hasn't been part of this budget negotiation. I think the timing really wasn't right, but that is definitely an implementation goal for hopefully in the near future.
You seem to be ahead of the curve when it came to the Black Lives Matter movement. And first of all, before we even get to what you've done, what do you envision or what do you see as Black Lives Matter, at least local? I'm not talking about the national. We can all pick up Time Magazine or the New York Times or the New York Post and we get something different. What do you think it is locally?
I don't know if there's really that blanket group that would identify with Black Lives Matter here locally. I just see it as a progressive movement, really fighting for the marginalized rights, and it, bigger than black, brown. I just think it's just asking for more inclusion in the overall process of justice.
So the first night they did an event at APD right along the outlet.
Yep. I
I saw you and Chief Anthony and several of your other officers there. In fact, I think there's a great photo that was on the national news of you, and you all attended subsequent rallies, in some cases speaking.
Yep.
How important was that from your perspective to have people understand your perspective, but also for them to know that you're listening?
Huge. I'm actually in a community collaboration class in my master's degree program, which I'm going to really take the real life lived experience incorporated into this class. I think it's paramount. It made this whole process really come to life, and the dedication and the work to what we've done years ago to that point, I think really paid dividends. People had trust in us. We had established relationships with a lot of the community members. It really got us to a point where we could, and you mentioned understanding. And to me, understanding is a two-way street because a lot of people don't understand why or what we do and what the purpose is. And I feel I try to do that with anybody that I talk to. Is I want to listen and learn your perspective, but I also would ask that you understand where we're coming from as well as the police, so we can have that mutual understanding.
So on that theory, because you were doing this long before, let's say March 1st of last year, almost a year now, some departments didn't, and it became harder for them. And their reactions were not as integrated and maybe understanding as Auburn's was.
Yes.
Is that because they may not have been doing it, so it was more reactive than proactive?
Absolutely. Enforced. Into us, this process, labor intensive, absolutely, but a lot of the work per se had already been established the Connecting Bridges program with the Harriet Tubman Center for Justice and Peace. We've been doing that for years. We've been engaged in those conversations.
So shifting gears just slightly, how many officers are at APD?
Unfortunately, not my budgeted amount. So
All
we're
right,
budgeted for 67. Right now, we're at 60.
Is that because you've also lost some people because of retirements?
A lot of people.
So you have how many vacancies right now? Seven.
8 coming next week. I have a retirement.
You have a retirement. So and you guys do a wonderful job. If everybody's, I'm not a Facebook person, but I do lurk on my wife's Facebook page, and they do a nice last radio call, and some of them get picked on, as they should, knowing these guys.
Yep.
They're mostly guys I've seen. But one of the reasons you were here and Jim Sladen was here has been talking about trying to get recruitment, and it's been tough in recruitment overall for all departments. This is not just an Auburn issue. Black Lives Matter, reaction to this, hours. People don't want to work nights. They don't want to do that. But one of the emphasis you had was to recruit minorities and women. And so you had an exam last fall. How did you do?
Our numbers were definitely down. So the exam prior, we had 188 that successfully passed the written exam, and this time we had 109. So dramatic change.
And how about breakdowns for females and what would be classed as a minority community?
I have not broken down the demographics yet, but I know Jack Hardy, our Civil Service Commissioner, said that this was the most diverse group that he's seen in quite a long time, if not ever. So that is great. And just to let you know, we are going through panel interviews this week with candidates, so hopefully.
And so how many women do you have right now on
9.
the phone? 9. How many would you classify as minority?
1.
And he's a Hispanic speaker.
Correct.
And when somebody hears 109, they think, well, you should be able to. That's just the test.
Yeah.
They have to do background checks, physical fitness.
Physical fitness first.
Other stability. So that number comes down.
Way down.
So do you see, when could the next test that you would. Because you can go through, the last time you went through the list, that was the problem.
It was a year, absolutely. I envision it again because the way we are losing candidates now for background type things, or they didn't pass the physical fitness test, I can see us probably being in a cycle for a little while of giving a test every year, unfortunately.
So why are you retiring?
So when I became chief, I had 20 years on, and I wanted to lead this department because, as you, I'm sure, can recall, we were in a place of internal strife as well as with the community. And I thought I would be the best candidate to turn that around. I knew it was a big challenge. In my mind and with my family, I gave it 5 years. My goal was to make 5 years. I've always been a firm believer that when you get to a point where you start slowing down and you're not progressing, and it's either on or it's off.
Right.
I do not want to I don't want to put it in neutral and coast. I could coast for another 10 years. I don't want to do that. It's not fair to the people that want to lead behind me. It's not fair to the city. I'm ready. I am ready. In talking to my colleagues, they always say, you'll know when it's time. And I think I've accomplished some great things. Not everything, unfortunately.
So what do you think is the biggest accomplishment at this stage?
I would say our community collaboration and our community relations in rebuilding that trust that we didn't have 5+ years ago.
Anything that's been a disappointment?
The pace.
You never go as fast as you want.
No. I wish I could have done more.
Well, you can go fast, but you just don't bring people along with you.
Absolutely. I work at a different pace, and my wife, who you know, always tells me.
I have known for many, many years.
You can't expect people to. You could ask that they rise to your level and do the things that you do, but you can't expect that it's always going to be the case.
So when do you finish?
My last day will be Friday, July 16th.
And one of the things that you did during the last 4 or 5 years, maybe it was 5 years, you did some training with the FBI. So what did you do exactly? So I know we talked about this a year ago or 2 years ago.
So I was lucky enough to be selected to go to the FBI National Academy. It's a law enforcement training for police executives. and it's from people from all over the world. So I was there with 249 other police executives from all 49 states. One, I think Vermont might have been the only one missing, in 11 different countries. So it was, I still, on my phone, I could pull it up, have chats going back and forth, just the collaboration and the connections that you
So how
make.
long did you do that for?
11 weeks, and that was down in Quantico.
And that process was all on hands-on down in Quantico.
It was, yeah.
So we're going to talk about accreditation and what it all is, and maybe we'll come back to that. But before we get to that, any post-retirement plans?
Traveling. We're going to take about 3 months.
I know you and your wife like to travel.
We do, yeah.
And will you stay in Auburn in the end, or do you have different plans?
We're going to move south.
Okay.
We're going to pull up. If my wife had her way, we'd be in Florida.
Okay. Not going that far?
No.
Okay.
So we're going to meet halfway, somewhere in the middle of the eastern coast. So, yeah, but we're going to travel for about 3 months. We enjoy camping.
That's great.
And we like international traveling, but there's a lot here we haven't seen in the national parks. We're really going to focus on the national parks here in the United States.
So has a successor for you been picked yet?
So there is an established civil service list, as you know. 3 candidates are on that list, and so one of them will
So it will be an internal pick, so you have 3. So this will be a pick made by the city manager?
Correct.
When will the pick be made? And by the way, we're going to ask Jeff Dygert this in 3 weeks anyway.
You know, the manager, and I'm thankful for that, as he saw what my succession planning was not, we would like to have somebody named well before I leave. So I would say in the coming months.
So before you leave and all
Absolutely.
that. So obviously, 2 people who are on the list have been guests here: Chief Anthony, your assistant chief, Jim Slayton. Can you tell us a little bit about the 3 candidates? And if you have a favorite on that, you can tell us.
Yeah.
I know I'm not going to get you to do that. Have you made a recommendation to the city manager?
No, and he has not asked, and he wants it to be as fair and honest of a procedure as he could make it. So at this point, he has not asked, and I have not given one.
So can you give us a thumbnail? I mean, many people know these people
Sure.
because of who they are, and they've been with the department many years. So who are the 3?
So as you mentioned, Deputy Chief Roger Anthony, Lieutenant James Slayton, who is in charge of our planning and training division, and Captain Kyle Platt, who is in charge of our investigation detective bureau.
Okay.
So all very senior officers with a lot of various experience, and who have all worked hand in hand with me throughout the last 5 years.
So one of the things that they've all been working on is this issue of accreditation.
Yes.
So for those who don't know, what is accreditation?
So accreditation is something, we're going for New York State accreditation. There is a national accreditation standard. We're going for New York State accreditations through the Department of Criminal Justice Services. And really what it is it focuses on 110 standards within policing that you have to meet or exceed. And it has a lot to do with policy and procedure, your day-to-day operations, how you do things, and developing policy that are seen as best practices in New York State.
And from your perspective, why is it important that Auburn, has Auburn ever had accreditation?
We have not.
Okay, so
Never.
why is it important for Auburn in your view?
It's part of the big picture is really what we've talked about is building that trust and transparency in our policing. I want our agency to be the pinnacle of the best. I want our standards to be the best. I want them to be recognized as police practices, not only in New York State, but nationally. And accreditation is the best vehicle to get us to that point. It's been a long process. We're well into 3 years in it.
So you are into 3 years. Will you finish the process before you leave?
I'm pushing.
Did you have any second thoughts about retirement? I know I joked with
This is-
a couple of weeks ago about it.
This is probably the biggest project or goal of mine that I'm probably going to leave with it not completed, but I think I've got
And your wife Lori was not hearing any of this.
No, I think I've got us close enough to that where we're going to be okay.
And but you hope that you might be able to have most of it done by then.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you about 3 policy or 3 issues that are related to what your office does, and we only have 2 or 3 minutes. I was reading the Kiplinger newsletter on Friday that in the last couple of months, FBI checks for guns for first-time I think it's first-time buyers. In January, it was 4.3 million firearm checks. In December, it was 3.9. So that's 400,000 up. From a law enforcement perspective, any thoughts on why these numbers are so high?
Well, if you look historically, I think when you have an election,
Change in administration,
there's a thought process out there that the next administration may make it harder to buy guns. I think that's part of it. As you can see, the divisiveness in our country, a lot of people are pro Second Amendment, which I am, and I'm a gun owner, and I have several guns. But I think that has a lot to do with it, the public sentiment or the public fear factor, right or wrong, if it's there or not.
So we live 20 miles from a city where there's gun shootings, unfortunately, I would almost say every day, unfortunately.
Sure.
How big are guns as a concern for you? And I don't want to jinx anything, but how big is gun, and in those cases it's often illegal guns. Not
exactly.
The ones I'm talking about are people who are going through a process.
Absolutely.
We know that there are millions of guns transferred, most likely every week, illegally.
Absolutely.
So how big a concern are guns?
And those are the ones I'm worried about.
Okay.
But responsible or semi-responsible gun owners often have their guns stolen because they're not doing the right thing with them. But
keeping them locked up, keeping ammunition separate.
Yeah. But we have definitely seized more guns in the last couple of years than we ever have. And I'll tell you, some of those have been what's referred to as ghost guns, which they're manufactured not by a legitimate manufacturer, parts and pieces.
They're not Remingtons.
Nope, and they're not serial number registered. That's a big problem. We're seeing that a lot more. You'll see it in Syracuse all the time.
I know they're not interrelated. I'm assuming they're not interrelated, but we're going to have Monica Salvage on talking from the Healing Project about opioid and heroin overdoses, which seem to be up, and then we're going to have Frank Barwinczak talking from Cayuga Community Action about domestic violence. I'm assuming those rises are not connected in your view, together.
No, domestic violence, and no, I would say the pandemic and those two go hand in hand.
That's where I was going to go with. We'll deal with domestic violence some other time, but on the overdoses, that number is up, correct?
Absolutely,
and
yes.
that's not just locally; that's statewide and nationally,
Yes,
correct?
Yes.
Do you think it's because of COVID, I don't mean this negatively or nastily, but have we taken our eye off of it because we're so concerned about the pandemic that we're not dealing with those issues?
No,
as well?
I'll tell you, we meet weekly, if not more than that, in regards to Monica's involvement with the Columbia study and the Cayuga County Substance Abuse Coalition. So we are pretty in tune with it, but you're dealing with disconnect of people and help and services face to face.
People who are isolated.
Absolutely isolated, and you mix in mental health issues with that, and you're doubling the effects. And
So are deaths up?
So this far, not.
But overdoses are up.
Overdoses are up. Yeah, we had 19, and we just had a meeting yesterday. I believe 19 in the city last month. Yeah, absolutely up. But we're also having successful saves with the Narcan distribution.
So last question, I don't want to end on a negative note, but I do want to talk about domestic violence. We're going to have Mr. Barwinczak. Domestic violence cases are up as well. Is that because of isolation as again?
I think it's stress in general. It's overall anxiety and family issues, money. I mean, the whole gamut. It really adds to the problem.
And complicating matters, though, is that many times the abused are, because of the pandemic, are in the same house as their abuser because they're either in lockdown or isolation.
Financially supported by and cannot escape.
So what would be your message to a victim right now who might see this, and what do you want them to do? And we're going to be asking this in a much longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do have a lot of services available. We have a victim specialist that's embedded with the police department, a new program. We still are continuing, even though through the pandemic we're doing domestic violence follow-ups. It's often hard to engage a victim on scene when the abuser's still there. We are doing follow-ups. That's the time. We're there. Long and short, we're there. Help is available. It's very courageous to ask for help, and it's not easy. We understand that. There's a lot of different reasons why people are victimized and why they stay with an abuser. We absolutely understand that, and we are definitely there to help them.
Well, Chief, I want to say on behalf of the college, congratulations on your retirement.
I appreciate it.
You have been very willing over the last 5 years. The students, the college, we appreciate you doing that. We wish you and Lori the very best. Happy travels and landing in the Carolinas or south of here. We understand the whole Florida thing, by the way. But our guest has been Chief Shawn Butler, who will be concluding 25 years with the Auburn Police Department in July. 5 of those, more than 5 of those, as chief. Next Tuesday, we'll be back in the studio with Auburn Superintendent of Schools Jeff Perazzola to update us on where the district is dealing with COVID-19 restrictions, and also about how he is going to try to continue to get students back to school 5 days a week in the classroom. On Thursday 11th, we'll have East Hill Medical's Executive Director Keith Cutler, whose agency turns 50 this year when it was founded in Cayuga County. And we have a number of guests who will be here in the next couple of weeks, including Assemblyman John Lamondes, City Manager Jeff Digert will be here, Port Barron Superintendent of Schools Neil O'Brien, the Dean of Cayuga County Superintendents, who is also on his way to retirement this spring, as well as we have just mentioned, Mr. Bauer-Winzak and Ms. Salvage to talk about both domestic violence and the rise in overdoses, respectively. If you'd like to send us your ideas for shows or questions for guests, you can do so at cozguytho@aol.com or at Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. We also would like to remind you that on April 27th, we will have the Auburn Enlarged School District Forum. We're going to do it by Zoom, so we'll see how that works out. But we encourage you to watch that as well. We hope you have a good weekend, a great tomorrow, and be back in the studio with us next Tuesday for the Superintendent of Schools. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. Have a good night.